This program contains graphic material, including offensive language. Viewer discretion is advised.
Once a king, always a king.
In the Windy City, the crown rules the streets.
Chicago is the motherland for all Latin kings.
They're the violent masters of the city's lawless hoods.
Protect the brown pride. The manifesto says kings die, but we multiply.
You can rob people, you can shoot people, you can do whatever you want to do.
The Latin Kings. They'll kill anyone to keep their kingdom pure.
They'll sell you out, backstab you, put an SOS on you, slam on sight.
Latin Kings in Chicago is the most vicious, brutal, law-breaking gang ever made.
Chicago. The Windy City is the home of championship sports teams, world-class restaurants, and a thumping nightlife. It's also the birthplace of the modern gang. The original Scarface, Al Capone, put Chicago gangs on the map and under his thumb, and changed the way crime happens.
You have the history in Chicago with organized crime, but really even in the mob's heyday, they were not piling up murder victims like the Chicago street gangs are.
Capone set up his gang on the north side, where his crew committed some of their most brutal murders. Today, Chicago's gangland is run from Humboldt Park.
Humboldt Park has two sides. The east side of Humboldt Park and then the west side of Humboldt Park is ran by Latin Kings.
Humboldt Park is the birthplace of the almighty Latin King and Queen nation, the heart of their kingdom.
Might vary to about 20, 30, 40, 50 members on a block. Here's where you got a lot of dominant Latin kings here. It's gonna save your L. There's a Latin for the Latin. It's gonna give you numbers. It's gonna have a 2, it's gonna have a 7. It's gonna tell you where they're from 27th. Here's an actual street, 27th and Drake.
The Kings, without dispute, are the toughest and best organized gang in Chicago.
These guys are very lethal, and they'll be quick to do what they have to do.
Either kill that motherfucker, get on, beat him, nothing is a problem. You know what I'm saying? Because you're a Latin King.
Big T asked to have his identity disguised. He's a former enforcer for the Latin Kings who grew up in Humboldt Park and joined the gang when he was 15.
I was in love with gangbanging. I was in love with making money. I was in love with I was in love with the whole package.
His story is not unique. The gang has recruited an estimated 25,000 members from across the entire city.
There are too many of us. You can't get rid of us. We're here to stay.
It's true not just in Chicago, but across the United States.
Chicago Latin Kings are the biggest Hispanic gang in Chicago and the country.
The Latin Kings are 50,000 strong nationwide, making them a super gang, with huge chapters in 4 corners of the U.S., including Los Angeles and New York. Yet all roads lead back to the motherland, Chicago, where the Latin Kings desire just 3 things.
And money and power, and drugs.
From meth to cocaine to marijuana, they own Chicago's drug trade.
The way you make the money is by selling drugs, whether it's cocaine, whether it's marijuana, whether it's ecstasy. That's what it takes to make money.
Some drugs are sold secretly from legitimate businesses.
Fruit markets, restaurants, little dives. They know people like to eat in little dives that are not expensive, so they use their dope money, open one up, and hey, I can sling dope at a tamale stand. I can bring a kilo across in a battery, pushing a paleta cart.
The nation, unlike most gangs, allows women to be full members. They are called the Latin Queens, and they're every bit as hardcore as the Kings.
I had drugs in and out of my house like water. All I had to do was pick up the phone and make a phone call, and I had what I wanted, when I wanted it.
Sonia Rodriguez asked to have her identity concealed. Her street name is Lady Q. Lady Q is the former girlfriend of the mastermind of the Latin Kings, a ruthless criminal named Gustavo Colon, aka Lord Gino.
It was rough. Being Gino's girl is rough. It's like being with the whole Latin King Nation.
Lord Gino has been locked up for decades, but managed to build the King's criminal empire from behind bars. Lady Q helped him run the streets.
And I was Gino's eyes and ears. So if I knew that one of the guys was trying to get over on him, whether it was a drug deal or just scamming on him, I used to bring it to Gino's attention. That person used to be dealt with on the spot.
Lord Gino is currently behind bars at the Supermax prison in Florence, Colorado. He's on lockdown alongside some of the country's most notorious criminals, but that has done little to diminish his power.
You know, he was the original Latin Kings. He is the man.
Lord Gino is, we consider him as a Corona.
Chicago authorities have struggled for years to stamp out Lord Gino and the Latin Kings. And they've learned there's just one way to do it: divide and conquer. June 2003. A joint task force formed, comprised of the ATF and the Cook County Sheriff's Department. Their plan: to cripple the Kings by taking out their top leadership. They called it Operation Broken Crown. There was only one way to gather information about the gang: from the inside.
We have individuals working off their arrest, or we also have individuals who are working for monetary purposes, and we have individuals working for revenge purposes.
Two high-ranking informants would help authorities learn confidential information about the Latin Kings' hierarchy and operations. But to gather evidence to build a case, they needed a mole. Then one landed in their lap.
One of the confidential informants had introduced me to a relative who was also a Latin King. And based on that introduction, he decided to become a confidential informant with ATF.
The Latin King agreed to wear a digital recording device. He was the last person the gang would suspect.
The individual was actually the guy in charge of searching all the Kings coming into the gang meetings. They were able to bypass all the security, or their security checkpoint that they thought they had.
The snitch wore a secret bug to meetings. The task force heard the name of one Latin King time and time again: Fernando Ace King.
He is feared amongst the Kings. He is a very violent individual.
Ace was the #2 Latin King leader in Chicago. He provided protection for gang members in the drug trade and was known for his quick temper and brutality. In this secret audio recording, Ace is heard ordering the beating of another Latin King.
Lock the f***ing door! I got it, you're right. I want to tell you, Crown Town boss, how to act. Be your boss, that's that. We don't let this
He wouldn't be an easy target. Ace knew how to steer clear of cops and snitches.
He's learned from other law enforcement investigations how to insulate himself from law enforcement.
To get to Ace, the informant would have to solicit help from him. In 2006, the informant set up a phony drug business and paid Ace for protection.
Our informant approached him and said, well, you know me as a drug dealer, and I'm going to start my drug business again. Will you afford me the same protection that you afford other Latin King gang members?
Ace wasn't paid in cash. So one cold Chicago night, the informant gave Ace a fake kilo of cocaine. This surveillance video shows Ace with the coke wrapped in a towel, stuffing it into a heating duct. The task force was gathering priceless evidence against Ace and the Latin Kings. But the nation's powerful empire wouldn't crumble that easily.
No matter where you from, we all like kings, man. Exactly, yeah, exactly what I do, okay? I threw a picture at a female. You don't do that.
Wherever you go, there's always a Latin king. Or just that big.
Chicago. Stretched along the cold shores of Lake Michigan, it's home to almost 3 million. To an estimated 25,000 gangbangers who live here, Chicago represents just one thing: the almighty Latin King and Queen Nation.
They get stronger and stronger. You know, every year they have new recruits. Every year they have new members joining in. It's like a never-ending story.
The story of the Latin Kings begins in the 1940s, when Puerto Ricans and Mexicans fled political upheaval and sought refuge in Chicago. Instead, many Spanish-speaking immigrants found racism.
The one thing that set an impression to me when I was in the United States was the unfairness that was shown blatantly by people in authority towards the people of color.
The immigrants responded by forming what they called social groups, claiming that they strengthened their sense of community. One of those was the Latin Kings.
The Latin Kings was actually formed to protect the people. Back in the days, it was to help secure the neighborhood.
In the 1960s, the Latin Kings found themselves in the thick of the civil rights movement, working to change the system.
They weren't a gang of thugs. They got the people together, they registered them to vote, they pushed for education, for equal rights.
This dream of change didn't last long. The culprit, heroin. The Latin Kings saw there was money to be made from addiction, and the nation took a new course.
The drug trade got introduced into the neighborhood. The easy money and the greed. People were getting killed left and right.
By the early 1970s, the former community group earned a new label as more and more Kings got into dealing.
You're fighting, fight might lead to shooting or whatever it might end up being, where now it becomes a street gang.
Two young leaders began to emerge as the gang's ranks swelled. On the south side, it was Raul Gonzalez, a Mexican also known as Baby King, or BK. On the north side, it was a Puerto Rican named Gustavo Colon, known as Gino. Even at the age of 18, he stood out.
He did have that kind of power and that kind of charisma. His stature was that big.
The Chicago PD was noticing Gino as well, for all the wrong reasons. On September 28, 1972, they charged Gino with shooting and killing another teen in the Humboldt Park neighborhood. Gino was convicted of murder and sent to Stateville Prison in Joliet, Illinois, for 30 to 60 years. Once inside, he began to compose a system of intricate laws for the Latin Kings. He called it a constitution.
While he was in prison, he made those codes of conduct and the rules for all the Latin Kings all over. And then they were all spread out to all the nation, to the hoods, and then everybody had to abide by those rules.
The code of conduct became the lifeblood of the nation.
Back then, it was straight. You were a Latin King, you had to learn your laws, you had to know what your beliefs were.
Puerto Rican immigrant Raimundo Sanchez was only too willing to follow Gino's rules. The 11-year-old lived in fear of an abusive stepfather and wanted a way out.
I remember he pulled out a .38 snub nose and he put it up my head. He cocked the hammer and my sister and my mother came running and got between the gun, and so he didn't get a chance to shoot me.
His escape was hanging with the Latin Kings in his neighborhood.
They were kids that basically accepted me for who I was, where I was allowed to express myself.
He even tried to sell the Kings the gun his stepfather had pulled on him.
They wouldn't buy it basically because they knew I hung out with them. That's going to be the first place the cops come looking for that gun.
In 1975, Raimundo became a Latin King by way of a violation. He joined the hundreds in Chicago who now swore allegiance to the nation. Around that same time, the Kings began to allow women into the gang. They became known as Latin Queens and were expected to be as hardcore as the men.
We used to go out there and beat up people and shoot at people and carry drugs and slang drugs, just like the Latin Kings. It didn't make a difference. We were just female.
15-year-old Sonia Rodriguez, aka Lady Q, endured a 3-minute beating to join the gang. Before long, she was running her own 6-woman crew.
The Queenston back in the days were badasses. At the time, I felt like I was on top of the world. I thought I won a gold medal.
Her crew was pushing cocaine and making money.
Back then, it was all about making money and trafficking drugs. That was me. I've never seen so many drugs and money than at the time I was a Latin Queen.
It was like an expansion of a store. If you weren't willing to be violent and fight for that store, then you weren't welcome.
While the gang had other leaders, like BK, Gino was eclipsing them from his prison cell and becoming the face of the Latin Kings. By 1983, he held the title of Corona and was being called Lord Gino by everyone. Lord Gino carried himself like royalty and held court with only a select few.
Lord Gino would only deal with a certain amount of people. He would never have direct contact with some of the underlings. He would more or less shield himself from the amount of people who could damage him.
Most accepted Lord Gino's leadership, except for Lady Q. When word got back that Gino's authority was being questioned, he asked her to visit him at Stateville Prison.
This beautiful, handsome man came up to me talking about what you got to say now. And I looked at him, I repeated every word. And ever since that day, he didn't want me to visit nobody. I had to go see him personally. We trusted each other, and there was nothing that I couldn't tell that man.
She became Lord Gino's private liaison and greased the wheels with some of his most important allies, the prison guards.
I used to meet guards on the south side and pay them off, and they used to take a certain amount of drugs into the penitentiaries for us.
Under Lord Gino's guidance, the Kings were taking over Illinois' prisons.
Latin Kings are the ones, they receive all the drugs in the prison system. And if you want any kind of drugs, you have to go through a Latin King.
In 1985, Big T, an enforcer for the Kings, landed in prison on drug charges. His punishment only furthered his business.
I was still holding it down in the prison because I was still a Latin King, and people still feared me in the prison. I was still running the deck that I was on.
The Latin Kings were growing. Based on the teachings of Lord Gino, the gang exploded into New York and across the country.
Latin Kings are all the same all over. Maybe just a few different rules might change here and there, but it's the same literature, same code of conduct.
Lord Gino seemed invincible, until some say he crossed the line. July 1989, Stateville Prison. Lawrence Cush, a corrections officer, turned up bludgeoned to death with an iron pipe. Cush, a law-abiding officer, had stumbled on the inner workings of the King's drug trade. The prison immediately suspected Lord Gino had ordered the hit.
You're not going to just kill or assault an officer unless it comes from somebody of authority, because there's always repercussions.
The warden ordered stepped-up surveillance on Lord Gino, but the prison never charged him with the crime. Lord Gino was transferred to a correctional center in Pontiac, Illinois, in order to diminish his control of Stateville. The kingdom was under fire, and before long, fractures began to form at even the highest levels.
Gino was the kind of person that he used to say, you keep your friends close, you keep your enemies closer.
You can never put all your trust in nobody, period.
The almighty Latin King and Queen Nation. Born and bred in the Humboldt Park neighborhood in Chicago. The oldest and largest Hispanic gang in America. It can be found in almost every state.
You got brothers from Texas, from New York, from Connecticut, North Carolina, South Carolina, California, basically in almost 41 states.
The Super Gang follows an intricate system of rules, symbols, and hierarchies dreamed up by the King of Kings, Gustavo Colon, aka Lord Gino.
There's literature, and I mean, it's just so much more organized than any other street gang.
That organization starts with the gang structure, which mimics a corporation. In Chicago, it's divided into regions: Montrose, Humboldt Park, South Chicago, Little Village, and Crown Town. Inside each region are dozens of chapters, which are largely divided by neighborhood. The chapters and regions are governed by an elaborate hierarchy that begins with the two Coronas, Lord Gino and BK. Then come regional officers, similar to generals.
There would be 15 to 20 chapters to one region officer. It would go from those Coronas to the region officers. The region officers had a certain amount of chapters under them. Nation enforcers were to run all the chapters under them.
The power flows downward. At the top of each chapter are Incas, the highest-ranking officers. The cacique, Spanish for chief, is second in command. Each chapter has an enforcer who makes sure everyone follows the rules. Finally, there are the Latin King soldiers, the backbone of the gang.
It's basically a chain of command, and everybody has to follow it.
The street soldiers patrol the streets, guarding the king's turf from rivals like the Satan Disciples.
As the Satan Disciple killer, kings are disrespecting Satan Disciples.
We got people hiding on the roofs with the guns. Well, you whistle, and you'll see Latin Kings pouring out of every corner.
In a city like Chicago, recruiting is a top priority. There's no age limit or race requirement, and recruits come from all over the metro area. All that matters is their willingness to put in work.
You could be young as 10 years old. It really doesn't have a number. If you got the heart to do it and you can prove it, we'll initiate you right in.
The Kings call potential recruits the new generation. The first step to joining the nation is enduring a brutal violation. Big T ordered scores of these beatings.
You could get initiated by taking a violation in, which is a 3-minute violation.
You got any tattoos on you?
The recruits might also have to commit a crime as proof of their loyalty.
You check them already?
You still want to turn in the Latin King, we might send you to do hits.
Pull up your pants, man. Where do you stay at?
We might send you to do some missions. We might have you shoot somebody, have you rob somebody, have you do some, things in the hood to prove yourself.
It's only after passing these physical tests that a recruit can learn the teachings of the nation. The soldier must memorize the rules and swear to honor them.
Everybody had to abide by those rules. And they took that really seriously. And they really followed those rules, which is the reason of their success.
To the Latin Kings, every letter, every word, every action stands for something.
Almighty stands for a love measured in great harmony towards Yahweh. In Latin, is Latin American tribe illuminating naturally. In Kings is knowledge indestructible, nobility going strings. In Nation is natural allies together in one nucleus.
The Latin Queens are also a critical part of the gang. They're recruited and expected to perform.
We used to look out for the guys when they were gonna go do their dirt. But as time went by, the girls got in as bad as the guys. I mean, they won't think about it twice in taking your life if they found themselves in that situation.
They're used for holding our guns. We sent them off on a mission where they wouldn't suspect two females to come at them. We'd send them to go pull a hit. We'd send them to do things for us in our neighborhoods where they wouldn't suspect women at all, but they are Latin Queens.
Latin Kings and Queens promise to follow 5 guiding principles.
Once a king, always a king. No king should. Engage in gay acts. No kings are supposed to be collaborating with the media. And no king is to lead the nation without the approval from those coronas. And one king moves, all kings move.
Those who break the rules are disciplined at weekly meetings.
During these game meetings, they have their leader who plays the judge. You have a legal coordinator who has to represent the guy, and they decide, well, this person's gonna get kicked out of the gang, if he's gonna get violated.
In this case, a violation refers to physical punishment. This video shows the violation of a soldier who didn't carry out an order to kill a rival.
The Kasinka ordered everybody to get in a circle, which they normally do for the meeting. And then after that, everybody in that house was told to beat that Latin King gang member. They gave them basically a minute violation head to toe. The gang members were getting tired after about a minute. They stopped, and the Inca said, no, 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 continue, continue.
Don't stop, man. Don't stop. Don't stop. You stop. Whoever stops, we get hit too, man.
The nation's ultimate discipline is called the Gold Crush.
The Gold Crush was coming to your chapter. You know something was wrong. That's what they call the Nation Enforcer, with about 12 other guys that was coming to visit the Inca because he knew he screwed up.
Mercy isn't guaranteed.
Sometimes you get your ass beat, you get a bullet to the knee, baseball bat to the head, your crown stripped. Sometimes even death.
The Latin King's colors are sacred.
The colors that we stand for and we believe in, which is black and gold. Gold is for the sun, where we pray to Yahweh as we face the east. And black is for darkness amongst all enemies.
Their favored symbols are the crown and the lion, icons of courage and pride. These symbols show up everywhere, including the gang's ink.
Every Latin King is required to have a tattoo of a crown or just the initials of Latin Kings or dots. The Latin King, that's the only thing that they got love for. Everything else, they say f*** them.
The crown also shows up in their tags, which mark their territory. The Kings on Chicago's South Side, who are largely of Mexican descent, traditionally represent with the 5-point crown. The 5 points represent love, honor, obedience, sacrifice, and righteousness.
If you're in Latin King territory, you would definitely see markings of a crown with L on one side of it and a K on the other side of it, which stands for Latin Kings.
Latin King Nation, it's got the 5-point crown.
The Latin Kings are also known to sport a three-point crown.
The three-point crown is primarily used by the Puerto Rican Latin Kings.
The Latin Kings gang sign resembles the three-point crown, with index, thumb, and little fingers pointed up.
Our three-point crown is knowledge, wisdom, and understanding.
All Latin Kings who represent with the crown know one thing for certain: death is never far away.
King of Kings, maker of the universe, and foundation of life.
As this video from 1990 shows, those who fall are given the ultimate respect. The king being honored here was shot and killed a few days earlier by a rival gang member.
King loved yesterday, today, tomorrow, always, and forever. Amor. Amor.
Death may be a reality for the Kings, but the message to other gangs remains clear. If you mess with one Latin King, you mess with the entire nation.
You walk around in the wrong neighborhood with wrong colors, you might get stopped, you might get checked, you might even get shot at. So you gotta know where you're at when you're in Chicago. All out here, they ain't playing around.
(1989), Pontiac, Illinois. The brutal murder of a prison guard led to the transfer of Latin King leader Lord Gino to Pontiac Prison. The move, intended to cut off his control of the Latin King nation, had no effect.
He controlled the prisoners. He controlled them all of them.
The Kings are the largest gang in prison, and their most feared gang in prison. They have access to a lot of weapons and drugs inside prison.
But trouble was brewing in the kingdom. For more than 5 years, Sonia Rodriguez, Lady Q, had been Lord Gino's girlfriend and helped him run the nation.
I used to visit him 5 times a month, talk on the phone. I mean, being his girlfriend is not glamorous at all.
Lady Q caught wind of a rumor that one of Lord Gino's closest associates was a snitch. Gino didn't buy it.
I can tell Gino he's no good till my face turned blue. Gino was not gonna believe no one until that person messed up themselves. I told Gino what they're saying is true. He's no good, he's a trick.
Soon, Lady Q made a request of the Corona. She was tired of the life and asked Lord Gino to retire.
I wanted him to give up his crown, do his time, get out, and make a life with me. That's what I wanted.
Lord Gino refused.
I guess the power was all to him. That's all that really mattered at the time, was having that power.
Lady Q walked away from Gino and her standing as the Queen of Queens. It didn't take long for Lord Gino to find a replacement. In 1990, he was transferred again, this time to Menard Correctional Facility, 350 miles south of Chicago. There, he legally married Marisol Rodriguez. Like Lady Q before her, she became his eyes and ears.
He's collaborating with his wife, and he sends a lot of messages through her to the streets.
Lord Gino's power seemed undiminished, and he was close to being a free man. In 1997, Lord Gino was finally eligible for parole after spending 25 years in various prisons. He had no idea that behind the scenes, the ATF had been quietly building a federal case against him, uncovering proof of his drug business.
He had numerous cell phones. Even as cell phones were starting to become new wave, he had a network that he was able to communicate with people on the outside.
Lord Gino was granted parole and scheduled to be released from prison. The nation was prepared to receive its king.
Every chapter was on standby because there was going to be a big nation party that weekend for him.
At the last minute, the ATF dramatically took Lord Gino into custody before he even left his cell.
Gino Colon was taken out on a stretcher and bound to the stretcher. We knew that if we went down there in force and showed up we were causing a possible problem for the prison population.
He was charged with conspiracy of contributing drug trafficking and all kinds of charges.
Gino's wife, Marisol, was also charged with conspiring to distribute cocaine, heroin, and marijuana. The Latin Kings were stunned.
Bam! Just knocked our head off. Wow. Everybody started pointing fingers, everybody started talking about it was this brother, it was that brother. It was his wife gave him. There was all kinds of rumors going around.
I cried. I cried. I was actually sitting in my kitchen, and my sister called me, and she's like, Gino's on the news. And I turned on the news, and I'm like, wow, again.
Lord Gino was found guilty of 18 charges, ranging from drug conspiracy to using a telephone to facilitate a drug felony. He was sentenced to life imprisonment and transferred to the United States Supermax in Florence, Colorado.
They based the whole trial on the phone conversations. They found him guilty on 18 charges and found him not guilty on 1. They gave him the door to appeal, and I'm praying to God that he beats the appeal.
For the first time, Lord Gino was put in lockdown, confined 23 hours a day, and allowed only 2 phone calls a month. It was a blow to the Latin Kings, but they wouldn't go down without a fight. From 1997 to 2003, the Latin Kings expanded their criminal enterprise in Chicago.
Latin Kings were heavily involved in the fake green cards for aliens. They were making a lot of money off of that.
The gang had other, more sinister scams.
What we call tumbes. Means we find a drug dealer who's in the neighborhood. He's not paying taxes to us, so we go and stick up his house and take all his dope and money.
They started to create legitimate businesses. Any type of business that's a cash business, because you're allowed to funnel money through it.
In December 2003, 5 years after Lord Gino's arrest, a joint task force mounted yet another major offensive against the Latin Kings. Operation Broken Crown. For 3 years, the task force gathered hundreds of hours of secret tapes, wires, and recordings, including this violation of a gang member. But the investigation's prime focus was on the Latin King's second in command, Fernando Ace King.
And that number 2 has been sort of the target spot for the feds.
The task force laid a trap for Ace and the gang, using snitches inside the Latin Kings. One informant posed as a drug dealer and gave Ace a kilo of fake cocaine in return for protection.
Tell me. Put it somewhere cold.
On December 5th, 2006, the feds sprung their trap. Ace was picked up at his mother's house and charged with drug conspiracy and cocaine distribution.
I believe we had in excess of 100 undercover recordings with Fernando King, either in person or maybe on a telephone, a quick phone call.
Ace and 34 other Latin Kings were arrested on charges ranging from conspiracy to possess and distribute cocaine to being a felon in possession of a firearm. 34 were found guilty and sentenced between 5 to 40 years in prison. Fernando Ace King was found guilty of all charges. His sentence is still pending. The task force had succeeded with Operation Broken Crown, but there would always be more kings where Ace had come from.
You kill me, the next one born the next day. You kill him, and there will be another one born the day after. You can't get rid of us. We're here to stay.
40 years, the Latin Kings have ruled Chicago. Their leader, Lord Gino, the almighty Corona, has spent most of that time in prison. Gino is now in exile in the Colorado Supermax prison, cut off from the nation he built from behind bars. His power is diminished, but not extinguished.
Lord Gino is, we consider him as a Corona. There's certain kings out there that don't give a about him. He ain't nobody no more. He's locked up. But a lot of people fail to realize that, yeah, he's locked up, but he has business still from his wife.
Whether you are an old school king or a new school, you know who Lord Gino is, and you know that you have to give your respects to the man regardless.
The ATF and Cook County Sheriff's Department Joint Task Force says that with 35 convictions of high-ranking Latin kings, Operation Broken Crown was a success. They admit, however, that their investigation only focused on Chicago's South Side, leaving the rest of the city untouched. Some say they should have thrown a wider net.
When they did the Operation Broken Crown, they only hit specific streets on the South Side. They should have made it a nationwide thing.
Chicago authorities track down the Latin kings every day on these streets.
Who do you ride with, bro? 2-7 and Holman also?
However, they are realistic about their efforts. When one king goes down, another pops up.
I don't really think we can ever win it. I think all we can do is slow it down.
Got phones, they even said Holman the 23rd. See, he's a king from Holman the 23rd.
And that's just being realistic. I think we can slow it down.
You're gonna disappear, no loitering. Go home, it's too cold.
The sting serves as a warning to the next leader of the Latin kings.
It's gonna be the choice of the next Latin king who wants to be the next Fernando king. Does he want to take a chance of being infiltrated in the future and possibly arrested and, you know, spending the rest of his life in jail? That's the chance that that person has to take.
To some kings, the risk of arrest or even death is no longer worth taking. Lady Q left the nation for good in the 1990s after she ended her relationship with Lord Gino.
It just wasn't worth it. I didn't want it no more. Either I'm gonna go to jail and do a lot of time if I stay in this, or either I walk away and get my together. I chose to walk away.
She left with Lord Gino's blessing. It wasn't as easy for Big T to make that choice.
I wanted to get out. And first they didn't want me to, you know, get out, but they really couldn't hold me back. And if I'm willing to pay the price, then there's nothing that could hold me back.
Big T did pay the price, choosing to be violated out of the gang.
You get a hit on your face, you get a hit on your body, your legs. I mean, wherever, they're kicking you, they're hitting you, however possibly they can hit you. Because that's your violation now. There is nothing no more after that.
He still lives in Chicago, but reveals little about his current life. Big T admits that at the end of the day, he's still loyal to the gang.
Deep down in my heart, I'm still a Latin king because I still got a lot of love for the nation, you know what I mean? But I just don't want to live that lifestyle anymore.
For every king that walks away, thousands more remain in the nation. Some say they're writing a never-ending story that will keep someone on the throne forever.
The whole existence is based on your fear of them and what they can do to you. There's been too much bloodshed, and there's too much revenge, and there's too much money being made for it to change.
Latin kings can't be crippled. That's impossible. Unless you put every single one of the Latin King members and put them on the wall and shoot them in the head. Every single one.